Every civilization that has unraveled has done so gradually and then suddenly. The gradual part is almost always the same. Wealth concentrates. Institutions are captured by the interests they were meant to regulate. The majority loses economic ground while a minority captures the gains from rising productivity. The story told to explain this arrangement becomes harder to sustain as the gap widens. Trust erodes. Legitimacy weakens. The sudden part is less predictable. Sometimes it is a revolution. Sometimes a war. Sometimes a demagogue who channels legitimate rage into illegitimate ends. We are in the gradual part now. The question is whether the tools available to those at the top of an AI economy make what comes next, for the first time in history, preventable from above rather than reversible from below. Before speculating about the future, it is worth being precise about what history actually shows. Every major rupture driven by inequality has followed the same sequence. Gradual divergence, wealth concentrates slowly enough that each individual step seems manageable. Institutional capture, the rules governing accumulation are reshaped by those benefiting most from it. Legitimacy collapse, the majority loses faith that the system can deliver through legitimate means. And then rupture. Rome followed this pattern. The French Ancien regime followed it. Weimar Germany followed it. The Russian Empire followed it. None of the ruling classes believed the rupture was coming until it had arrived. The French aristocracy could not imagine their world would be gone within a decade. Parts of the Weimar business community contributed to extremist funding, believing the movement could be controlled once in power. The Tsar's court maintained elaborate rituals in 1916 while the empire collapsed around them. The pattern is a specific failure of imagination. The inability to take seriously a future that feels discontinuous with the present. The historical pattern is real and well documented. But the AI economy has three features that change the analysis in ways that matter enormously. The first is the maturation of surveillance as a tool of preemptive suppression. East Germany's Stasi employed roughly 1 in 63 residents as officers or informants. One of the most intensive surveillance operations in modern history. And it still failed to prevent the 1989 revolution. Recruitment difficulties in the final years reduced capacity precisely when popular unrest was growing. An AI surveillance system operating at scale does not face these constraints. It does not get tired. It does not require recruitment. It does not defect. More importantly, the most dangerous capability AI gives to concentrated power is not physical force. It is prediction. A system that can identify the early stages of collective organization before any movement reaches critical mass does not need to be violent. It just needs to be early. Intervention before grievances coalesce into action is far more efficient than suppression after the fact. The second feature is the erosion of military defection risk. Historically, the single most decisive factor in whether uprisings succeeded was whether the army and police defected to the people. When soldiers are drawn from the same class as the dispossessed, at sufficient provocation they stop obeying orders. This is what broke the Russian Tsar, the French monarchy, and dozens of other regimes across history. Autonomous weapons systems and robotic enforcement platforms do not have class solidarity with the people they are deployed against. They do not hesitate at orders. They cannot be recruited to the other side. The trajectory of military and security investment in every major power is unambiguously toward autonomous systems. The reasons are partly conventional military. But removing the human from the enforcement loop also has obvious advantages for governments that cannot rely on human soldiers remaining loyal under pressure. The third feature is economic dependency as a precision control instrument. If the dispossessed depend on digital infrastructure controlled by concentrated private power for their food delivery, housing access, financial transactions, communications, and employment matching, then economic exclusion becomes a more precise and less politically costly tool of control than physical force. Deplatforming, demonetization, and algorithmic suppression are already used against individuals and organizations. The question is whether they remain edge cases or become systematic instruments of social control as economic life becomes more fully digital. A dissident whose payment system stops working, whose social media presence disappears, whose employer receives a quiet flag, and whose housing platform receives an automated notification does not need to be imprisoned. They need to be made economically invisible. This does not make the worst outcome inevitable. History suggests it is not. But the reasons it is not inevitable are more fragile than most people assume. Elite fragmentation creates instability that monolithic control scenarios underestimate. A world where AI capability is concentrated in competing firms and states is more unstable than a unified oligarchy. The French Revolution was partly enabled by conflicts within the aristocracy itself. The Russian Revolution exploited splits within the military command. AI surveillance also has genuine competence ceilings. It is trained on historical patterns and fails against genuinely novel forms of organization. Every successful resistance movement succeeded partly because it did things the surveillance system was not trained to detect. And systems without legitimacy eventually collapse, however technically sophisticated their enforcement becomes. History suggests the timeline can be very long. But the direction is consistent. The realistic range of outcomes is a spectrum, not a binary. At one end, managed transition, democratic institutions prove sufficient to implement redistributive AI governance before the control asymmetry becomes irrecoverable. Possible, but off the default trajectory. In the middle, a bifurcated world. Some jurisdictions implement meaningful governance, others do not. Zones of managed transition alongside zones of deepening dependency. Messy, uneven, with significant human suffering in the uncorrected regions. Further along, oligarchic consolidation. Democratic institutions are gradually hollowed out while maintaining procedural form. Elections continue within parameters that exclude genuinely redistributive outcomes. Not Orwell's vision of boot and face. Huxley's vision of distraction and compliance. At the other end, rupture. Legitimacy collapses faster than control mechanisms can compensate. The outcome depends entirely on which forces are organized and ready to fill the vacuum. History's record on post-rupture outcomes is not reassuring. Between these outcomes, the single most important variable is not technological. It is temporal. The window during which democratic redistribution of AI gains is institutionally possible is real but closing. It closes as surveillance infrastructure matures and normalizes. It closes as economic dependency deepens and becomes structural. It closes as political institutions are further captured by concentrated capital. It closes as the narrative of inevitability, that this is simply how things are, becomes dominant. None of these processes are instantaneous. All of them are underway. The ruling classes that failed to redistribute power before the window closed were not uniquely evil. Most believed they were acting in the best interests of order. They failed because they confused the stability of their present position with the sustainability of the system they presided over. The AI displacement wave is not a future scenario. It is the present trajectory of identifiable, measurable processes already underway. The fiscal and governance architecture examined across this series is not speculative advocacy. It is the minimum response required to prevent the divergence from crossing the threshold where the historical pattern reasserts itself. The question for every society navigating this transition is the same one every society in the gradual phase has faced, and most have answered too late: how much disruption will we allow to accumulate before we act? Next week we answer that question differently. We show what the good outcome looks like from the inside, through one person who grew up after the transition generation made the right choices. Subscribe to FutureWorkSociety for weekly analysis on AI, automation, and the future of the social contract.